And I'm like, right, hold on. We got a week till Books Boys, and I've got to read this very large hardback Herod the Great in Spanish. Herodes el
In
Grande.
Spanish, you had a whole week for this.
Yeah.
Okay, not much time.
By
How many
Jose
pages?
Luis Corral Antonio Piñero. Herodes el Grande. Just under 600 pages.
Okay,
So I looked at it, right, we're aiming for 100 pages a day, more or less.
essentially.
That's what we're at. 80, 85, whatever. So I
Did you
think
finish it?
I yesterday, like I just finished it
Okay.
on time, and today I reviewed all my notes before we recorded. So it came down to the wire. I liked it. It's good. I'm gonna go ahead and say maybe the first time we have a clean sweep. It gets a yeah, yeah, yeah. Not the strongest I've ever given, but still good. Um, I think the only negative thing I would say about it is that it was a bit too long or oddly paced in parts. It could have, similar to the last book, it could have done more with the time it had. Spent a long time on some stuff and then just skipped over a lot of other stuff like it could have been structured better, I think. Um, but in terms of the story and everything, I liked it. And it got me thinking, like, Herod's a really interesting character, and I like him as a character the way I like Nero. The people that people hate. And it says in this book, the best king, the biggest assassin. you know, and that is essentially what he was. And I remember studying a bit about Roman Judea in my history degree, and I always found him a very interesting character. Of course, the Bible portrays him as a bit of a all-powerful. We talked about this recently, as a bit of an all-powerful.
Yeah.
He was not. He was a Roman client king, so he was very subservient to the Roman emperor and senate, even.
Yeah, he was a governor-ish, and like he didn't have a ton of control, it seemed like. He had
He
enough,
he
but
had enough for where he was, like, yeah, in Israel or whatever, but he doesn't have.
how much of that, so are we talking like Kingdom of Israel? Are we also including Judah in there? Like we were looking at the maps before, like how much control would he have even had?
Yeah. I mean, I think he had a decent amount of territory, but then at one point, Mark Antony gifts Jericho to Cleopatra, which would have been like right in part of his territory, but he gets that back later. Um, then I think his brother had like some territory, and then I mean, spoiler, but when he eventually dies, the territory gets further divided among his sisters and other sons and things. So it seems like there were generals and governors and tetrarchs and things like this, but yeah, he was at least a powerful enough king of the Jews at a time. And he ruled for almost 40 years, so I think he definitely had some power, but his entire reign was full of paranoia the whole time, and hence the assassinations, essentially. Um, so I'll get into the plot a little bit. I don't think I need to labor it too much. Um, there's a lot of really good books like this in Spain at the moment, and I've read some of the Roman ones in the past as well, and some of the ancient Greek ones as well. They seem to have good authors who are really good at doing these quite long, it must be said, but historical fiction type of treatments about ancient history and about the time periods that I like, and they seem to do it very well. Um, but this one was a little bit boring in parts. And it might tie in with what you said. Maybe if I'd done it over 2 weeks instead of one, I might have enjoyed it a little bit more. I was cramming and it was becoming a chore in parts.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I do read, sorry, but I do read a little bit slower in Spanish as well. So it was just,
Hmm.
taking a bit more time. But
So is this historical fiction or is it historical?
it's one of those that is essentially a fictionalized telling of history. So it is attempting most of the ones I've done about is in Rome
Like
and Greece and
Plato?
stuff. Yeah, more or less an accurate telling, but then like yeah, they'll obviously it's written as a story, so they're fictionalizing the conversations and things like that, of course, but
Oh,
the
okay.
actual events should be accurate. So more history as fiction rather than historical fiction, I suppose. Like it's written as a fictional novel, but it should be historically accurate. So I really liked it. Um, I think Herod's a cool figure, and I think what should be said before we start I mean, yeah, you asked about the maps. I'm not exactly sure how far the territory spans because we were looking at that, like, okay, Kingdom of Judah, Kingdom of
Hmm.
Israel, Palestine, all these things on the map, you know. Um, he's subservient to Rome the whole time, but he still is a bit of a stronger king. Unlike later, so something that's a bit confusing in the Bible when they refer to King Herod is at the beginning they're talking about this Herod, and later they're talking about one of his sons,
His
Herod
son. Yeah.
Antipas, who is actually not even his successor as king, is just a regional governor of Galilee, you know. So actually much Antipas was much less powerful, but the Bible kind of just refers to King Herod, you know, and it's a bit unfair there. I do think Herod gets a bad rap in parts because he built the temple, like the Wailing Wall and everything, and all the reason that Jerusalem's still this, holy city, and it's, by three major religions, right? And it's the remnants of this temple, and that was built by Herod. And I believe he built the third temple. There had been a predecessor that he built the glorious one, the proper version that is still kind of
Everyone
revered.
still,
Yeah.
yeah, everyone likes to, even though at the time they didn't want it. So why did it become revered? Like, when did that happen?
I think it's just it became the entire focal point of their religion, right? And you would have diaspora Jews coming to do their pilgrimage there, and that's a story I never understood in the Bible. Is when like Jesus would overturn the tables and say, "Don't do money changing." And it's like, well, your entire religion is predicated on this. Like these people have to come from the places they live in to do a pilgrimage and then change their money to go in and buy the sacrifices. And you've just come in and profaned the temple and caused violence and chucked tables around. Like, of course you were arrested, you know? And Herod sets
Hmm.
out the temple with the strictures of religion, and like you've got an area where Gentiles can come, an area where only Jews can come, then only priests, and then the Holy of Holies where only the high priest can go once a year. Although famously it was entered by Pompey the Great, who kind of did a sacrilege and walked in and was like, "Ah, nothing there," you know. But
Yeah, well,
parts of it, the inner parts, only priests could build even because like no one else was even allowed to be in that part while it was being built, like the most holy parts of it and things like this. And he named some of the towers after like this. The one of the towers is called Antonia after like Mark Antony and things like that. So he does show his influences, but he has a lot of Roman influence as well. And some of the people don't like that there'll be like Roman statues and that type of stuff around for Roman gods and things like that. Um, the Jews always kind of demanded special treatment in the empire, and we do see at certain points certain characters. I think in particular, maybe is it Cleopatra or is it Livia, who is Augustus's wife, at certain points says like, right, stop giving them special treatment, just treat them like any other province of the empire, you know? But for the majority of the time, they were being the only kind of monotheistic part and having their sacred city and everything, they were given a certain bit of extra scope. Um, so story-wise, Herod is paranoid the whole time that his family all want to kill him and that everyone hates him. But the thing is, his family all want to kill him and everyone hates him. So he's kind of right, you know?
and now back to you.
Yeah. Um,
Just
this
the
has
way you
been
said it,
this has been the news.
BBC
Tomorrow
style.
there'll be more news. Yeah, so the thing is they do want to. And when I read this, the first thing I thought is, why isn't there a Shakespeare play about this? Like this would have been fantastic. So just before coming on, I did just a 10-second Google search, like has there been a play about Herod? There have been some. There was like a 12th century musical. I'm sure that's not enjoyable at all. Um,
12, that can't still be extant.
it probably is not. There is, I hope it's extant, I'm not sure because I was tempted by it. There's a medieval, I think, sort of maybe 1500s play also about Herod from those kind of mystery plays and things and miracle plays that we had in that time period.
They're
I
usually
don't,
morality plays, and
most of
but
that stuff is
there's
not
not
extant
much.
either though. Yeah.
Yeah, most of that's gone. There's like Every Man, if you want to read that play,
Hmm,
that one exists. But yeah, most of them you're not
are
going to be able to
gone.
find, I don't think.
So maybe we won't find it then.
I mean, look,
Pageant. They refer to it
but
as a kind of pageant mystery play. Apparently, there is also, I vaguely recall Salome by Oscar Wilde touching on this. So Salome is the sister of Herod.
oh,
Um,
interesting.
Salome is the arch villainess of the book, essentially. And Herod spends the whole book trying to figure out which family members are trying to screw him over and assassinating them all. And on his deathbed, kind of says, "Thank goodness you stuck by me this whole time, Salome." When actually she was the one that he never suspected, and she was the one who pulled all the strings all the whole way through the entire book, basically.
Okay,
So
yeah.
that is, I felt bad for Herod because he thinks he's now, of course, he's way up his own ass, but he thinks he's a great king. I guess there's a reason he chose to call himself, Herod the
Herod the
Great.
Great.
Um, he kind of is, though. There's an interesting point where it describes, let me see if I can find it, the stuff that he did for the city. So if I can't find the quote, I'll more or less paraphrase. Okay, here we go. There's two ways you can look at a ruler, right? So the way he looks at it
Hmm.
is like, I've brought great fame to us. I've made us, successful. I've built the freaking temple and a bunch of other stuff. I've put on big, notable spectacles. I've organized games. I've done like brought lots of people here, a theater, a hypodrome, all these public buildings. Like I've done all the stuff that a great king is meant to do,
Yeah.
and put us on the map and all this type of stuff, and we've become economically sound and whatever else. But the way that people look at it is like, well, you've done a lot of assassinations. We're not even allowed to gather in the street in more than 10 people at any given time in case we're hatching a plot, you know, and all this type of stuff is going on. So they don't like him, but the main re it's a bit sad actually. The main reason they don't like him is that they don't consider him fully Jewish. So this is kind of crappy. He's Idumean, which means he's really only like a half Jew essentially. So from the very beginning, they will not accept him. And he's a general and he kills a bunch of people and it's questionable about whether that was essential and he does have to kind of get exiled for a while, but this like random guy says to him on the way out, like, I prophesy that you'll be king one day. And that's shockingly unheard of. And then it does happen. And he comes
Mm,
back. But when he goes to the Sanhedrin for his trial, I mean, I think the guy was just dripping aura, you know? He goes into his trial to be, punished for killing all these people and walks in like a king, like with the robes and just, majestic. And they're all in awe of him almost while he's giving his defense that he basically says, well, what are you going to do about it?
yeah, there's a lot of historical evidence for the bad things that he did.
Yeah.
There's yeah, lots of people wrote about like, oh yeah, he killed lots of people. He never did the baby thing, which was interesting because
Yeah.
nowhere wrote anything about that, which was quite interesting. But
But yeah, he does kill a lot of people in the book. Like that has to be said. I feel bad for him because he knew he was never accepted from the beginning, and he laments a little bit at the end. It's like no matter what I've done for them, they were never gonna like me from the beginning. They just decided on essentially racial grounds, which is crappy, They just decided like that they would never like me and that was it. It wouldn't matter what I'd done. And I tried to educate them and they're still ignoramuses, basically, And he's sad about that. But yeah, of course, the things he does throughout the book are also pretty horrific. So there
yeah,
there is that.
and he
Um,
died what, like 10 BCE or something, like around that time. Would have been,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the year offhand, but he lives pretty
I don't
old.
know,
Something I don't understand is that his family are all in league against him, even when he's quite old. And it's like he's gonna
4,
die in like 2 years anyway. You know?
4 BCE.
Okay.
I was off by 6.
Hmm. I don't understand. Yeah, because they reckon that if he existed, Jesus would have been born 6 BC, is it?
Something like that, but it doesn't line up with the census.
Yeah. And anyway, um, so yeah, quick bit of the plot. He becomes the king then. He makes a few wrong decisions because he sides initially with Caesar, but then I think he sides with Brutus and Cassius when they kill Caesar. But then, of course, Octavian comes to power. So then he has to go to Octavian with his tail between his legs and be like, I made a mistake with Brutus and Cassius. But remember, Caesar did like me at a point. Then he kind of switches allegiance to Mark Antony and Cleopatra. But then Cleopatra doesn't like him, so there's always like suspicion there. And she tries to get him in trouble a few times. And then after Mark Antony with the second triumvirate, when Octavian then becomes properly emperor, he then switches back again and has to be like, "Hey, but I'm still your friend." But everybody seems okay with it. They're just like, "We all think you're the right man for the job, so it's fine. Switch your allegiance." It doesn't seem to bother anyone. And he's ratified in the Senate as a client king. He cannot choose his own succession, but it does seem that he's allowed to essentially choose, but then it has to be ratified by Rome. So it is the emperor's decision, but his input is definitely taken into strong consideration. And he does essentially choose in the end. But they also get some consideration over who will marry and who his sons will marry and all this type of stuff. Um, but actually, he marries a girl called Doris and he has a kid. Um, the problem is, he then immediately finds another girl called Mariamne and is like, well, she's much prettier than Doris, so probably don't worry about Doris and don't worry about this first kid that I had, and just kind of abandons them. And then he has two more kids. I'm not going to attempt their names because they are all very similar. They all start with A. I think it's like Aristobulus and Antipatro and Archelaus. They're all very similar, so I'm going to get them mixed up anyway. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so the two kids are kind of dumb and very easily manipulated by Salome and also by Mariamne's mother, who is a bit of a villain in the first part of it as well. So they're all against Herod, but he just starts killing them. So like when someone is against him, he has them killed. He kills Mariamne. So first he kills Mariamne's brother. Then when Mariamne stops sleeping with him, and he's like, he does not rape her, thank God, but he does order her to have sex with him,
Okay.
and she says no, and then he's like, oh, thought that would work. Okay, all right then. Never mind. I don't want you anyway. But there is a funny moment where he turns down sex from Cleopatra because he's so paranoid that he thinks it's a trick and she's gonna like accuse him of rape or something like that. But no, she was just sexy and she just was gonna have sex with him, and she's really mad that he stands her up then and doesn't come into her chamber at night. And she's like, "Who does he think he is? Like he can even resist me?" Um, but he does marry a bunch of people, but the book spends so much time on the first two, like Doris and Mariamne and those first three kids. The two boys are his favorite, but eventually Salome keeps poisoning and poisoning his mind against them, that they're in league against him, but then also poisons their minds to be in league against him. So the accusations become accurate, that he eventually has to kill them and their mum and, I think the granny as well, like he has to kill all of them. And there's a plot against his brother. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. Um, he eventually goes back to the first son and is like, "You're going to be my heir, and I'm so sorry that I like kicked you aside all this time," not knowing that Salome has been sleeping with her own nephew, which is the first son, and now poisoned him also. So when he finally
Oh,
poisoned his mind as well. So when he finally agrees with the first son is now the one who's really out to get him. And now he's like, hold on, was this all a plot? I killed the other two sons. Were they out for me or not? Or is it all a plot that you've been doing? And he never quite gets to grasp with it. And his best friend is essentially the chief of police who's helping him with things. Because he's no other real friends, apart from near the end, the famous historian Nicholas of Damascus appears as a friend of his and does some errands for him. But essentially, he's terrified the whole time. And the Romans are sometimes thinking, he can't even manage his own family. How can we let him run a country? And Augustus actually likes having one or other of his children in Rome at any given time as a kind of unofficial hostage almost to help keep Herod in line a little bit. Um,
well,
so it was like, I'll send one of your sons for some education, and then I'll keep a close eye on him. Um, but yeah, it is just leagues of plots after plots where everyone is out to get him, and he kills them all.
he did
And
very well to survive so many then.
he did, and he's really heartbroken. Every time when he realizes like his sons were betraying him, he's really heartbroken. And he thinks the only one who ever stuck by him was his sister, and she was she was actually planning on getting rid of him and marrying someone and marrying her own cousin or niece or nephew or something, and then becoming queen because she wanted power as well. And I think that would have broke his heart. So it is written in a way to make you feel bad for him, to be honest. Even
Hmm.
though it also mentions like all the horrible things he did as well. I guess it tries to give you like, both sides of that. Um, which is nice. And he was a friend of, good friends with Augustus and everything like that, and we get to see a bit of that. But yeah, I think at the very end, on his deathbed, he says to Salome, round up the 300 nobles and execute them all. And
Oh wow.
she does not do that because he's so paranoid. He's like, even the aristocrats are against me. Like, everyone's been against me this whole time, and I've had enough. Just kill everyone. But she's like, okay, not gonna do that. And then she immediately starts meddling again and writes to Rome and says, like, maybe, you should change his line of succession and, do some other bits that I've concocted and stuff like that. So
I feel like
she's,
things don't turn out well for her though.
it doesn't tell us anything bad about her at the end. The book basically ends with her hatching another scheme.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah. But a lot of other people did die. I mean, at one point, Augustus falls out of favor with him. Herod falls out of favor with Augustus because there were some lies about how many people he's killed that are greatly exaggerated, and it turns out not to be true. And they think he's invaded a foreign territory when he hasn't. He's only stopping bandits and things like that. But when he kills Mariamne, he essentially wipes out the Hasmoneans, which were like the previous royal lineage. So that was quite serious as well. Historically speaking. But he does get to divide his territory up. Archelaus, I think it is, becomes the main kind of king of the Jews after him, and then Antipas gets his territory, and even Salome gets a little bit. Of course, not enough for her. The book is just full of terrible people scheming and plotting when they could have just been nice and had happy times.
It does seem like that was basically the time period.
Pretty much, yeah. Well written, but again, it just labors it in parts. So because it turns out he had a lot more wives and a lot more sons, and they just get like a passing mention once or twice. And so why do we spend like hundreds of pages on these first two? Like we could have split this up a bit better and described a bit more of his reign. It just got
Was it
bogged in politics.
necessary? Are those important sons or anything? Or
Well,
daughters? And
arguably yes, because the two that actually take power at the end were barely mentioned throughout the book, because
okay,
the book
yeah.
focuses entirely on the three that get killed. So,
Oh, okay.
I mean, I
Yeah,
guess you
it's
could
not
say
really.
write a sequel about the others then, but
That's the thing. Like, you got to streamline it. Do you want that book to be longer?
yeah, well, when I read, I just thought if only this book was longer, that's what I really want. But no,
There
it
you
was
go.
good. It was good. I liked it, and I like this type of book anyway. So it was very interesting, but mixed feelings on Herod himself. Because of
Yeah,
course he did bad things, but a lot of we assume he's a bad person. But a lot of that comes from like the biblical interpretation as well, and killing the babies and that type of stuff, which didn't happen and things like that. So yeah.
yeah.